Hello, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear food friends. Cordially welcome to the European part of the Awareness Week. I hope you will enjoy our session. And now I give the word to our president, Dr. Abbas.
Thank you very much, Wilma. I have an honor to have the opportunity to welcome you all to this fifth session, this week-long campaign of DFood International flagship program of Diabetes Food Awareness Week, which actually been running daily, and it started on 7th of November and will end on 14th of November. On 12th November, tomorrow, Sunday, we have a global meet where all 7 regions will come under one roof. So you are all welcome. Now we are going to present a short video. It's less than 3 minutes for introduction. Ali. It is an honor and privilege to address you today as President of DFood International. I speak not only to the diverse and vibrant individuals present here today, but also to hearts and minds of millions worldwide, united by a common cause to combat diabetes-related food complications. DFood International is an organization consists of people working in the field of diabetes-related food complications. These people are spread across 7 regions in the world: Sub-Saharan Africa, South and Central America, Middle East and North Africa, North America and Caribbean, Europe, Southeast Asia, and Western Pacific, all dedicated to providing preventive food care for people with diabetes through awareness, education, and professional guidance. The looming global diabetes epidemic is a step reality, projected to rise with the highest burden in low middle income countries. As diabetes rates surge, so does the incidence of diabetes related complications, including food related complications, which is our focus of action here at DFood International. Our mission of DFood International is resolved and clear: ending avoidable low-limb amputation due to diabetes worldwide. It is not just a vision, but a mandate, a call to action demanding our utmost attention and urgency. We should all unify our goal and aim for a 50% reduction in limb amputation rates by 2026. In this mighty ambition, education and the empowerment of healthcare profession are our only weapons of choice. As I often say and will continue to say, education is only powerful tool we have. Education is power, especially in the low middle income countries, where it is free and immensely effective when properly implemented. It is noble pursuit. We at DFood International are proud to see the happenings of Diabetic Awareness Week campaign. This campaign, we find each one of you as a faithful ally in this great endeavor. The success of DFood International goals depends on your patience and efforts for educating communities and obviously raising awareness. Diabetes Awareness Week campaign is one of the flagship program of DFood International. As every year, this year we'll have programs in all the regions starting from 7 to 14 November. We have one day allocated for global meet where all the regions come together on one platform. Today, I invite every one of you to picture a world where every healthcare professional is prepared to offer knowledge and skills to provide specialized food care. Imagine a nation where stigma attached to preventable amputation is eliminated and a gap between affordable and accessible diabetes food treatment is permanently addressed. Coming closer to the end of my short introduction, D-Food International extends a hand of collaboration to every one of you. Let us work together to promote care of diabetes-related food complications and their management, making it financially feasible and increase awareness about it. Lastly, I would like to personally thank everyone present here today for being part of this noble cause. We look forward to the impact we can create together. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Vilma. Back to you.
Yes, thank you, Abbas, for this lovely introduction. I won't lose much time. I'm very happy, I'm honored that today with us is Professor Luigi Uccioli from Rome, from University Tor Vergata. And as I can see from the title of his talk, I feel that he'll tell the story we all know, that the foot is not just the foot, but we are dealing with a person who has 2 feet coming into the clinic. So I'm hardly waiting for Luigi's talk. Luigi, welcome.
Vilma, good morning. Good morning. First of all, thank you to the D-Food International for this kind of invitation, and to you, of course, for sharing with me this this time. I share the screen. Let me see. This is okay. Okay, you can see. Okay, the title that of my talk reflects exactly what Vilma was telling, that the problem is not only related to the food, that is an important part, but is not the only one. So I want to focus on other problems that our patients have. And you can see that it's a big mistake to consider the bad food as a problem of ulcer and medication only. You can see this is just a typical ulcer, but you can see here, this is a gangrene of the fourth foot, but it's not only. You have the diffusion of the gangrene also to the plantar aspect of the foot. And this is a patient that is suffering with very high levels of glycemia, hypertension, renal insufficiency altogether. And we must take care of all those aspects to have a good resolution of this acute condition. So we say that diabetic foot is like a leak in the roof. So, and as I tell always to my students, when they are able to take care of patients with diabetic foot, they can be happy because they are able to care the worst diabetic patients that they can meet in their life. So the foot is a part of the story, but is the problem is of aging, fragility, comorbidity, problems of economic problem, social isolation, reduced lifespan, and there is a lot of literature on each aspect of this big story of diabetes, diabetic foot. And we some time ago we defined diabetic foot as the complication of the complication, and the role of comorbidities is important in the evolution of our patients. So what is the impact of comorbidities on diabetic foot? We have already had some data from Eurodial that we did together with Vilma almost 15 years ago. And we saw that patients that have comorbidity were at that time around 32%, as you can see here from this slide. And we used to know that the patients with comorbidity had a worse outcomes than patients without comorbidities. And we used to divide our patients as affected by neuropathy plus ischemia, and patients with ischemia only. And this is 50%, 30%, and 20%. So the group of neuroischemia was around 30%. Those data were data around 2003, 2004. But in 2011, already David Armstrong showed that probably our population, our patients were changing. And he noted that the patients that we were taking care were patients much more difficult, with lesion much more difficult to heal. And he highlighted that probably the patients with peripheral arterial disease were increasing in our outpatient clinic. And while we saw that in a Eurodial study we had PID around 50%, but only 55.8 were patients with renal insufficiency, only around 10% were patients with heart failure. And you can see here that the outcomes were different in patients with, of course, with dialysis and heart failure. But the most important thing is that we did the same study in our group of patients some years later, just to check the characteristic of the patients. And we found that now the patients neuroischemic are around 70%. So there is a huge increase of the patients with the peripheral vascular disease, but also the percentage of patients with renal insufficiency and heart failure is 3 times and more than 5 times more than the patients that we used to follow with the Eurodial. And you can see here the data. But again, the problem is the presence of comorbidities, co-diseases, and we have more than 30% of the patients with 4 or more concomitant comorbidities. And you can see that we have different outcomes according to the presence of neuropathy, neuroischemic and ischemic patients. And you can see that when you have neuroischemic patients, neuropathic patients in comparison with the neuroischemic, you have less limb salvage, less healing, measured amputation, and measured deaths. And this is very important because that means that our patients now are much more difficult than 20 years ago. And what are the risk factors, the predictors of amputation? Is a heel location of the ulcer, revascularization failure, and dialysis, you can see here. And for that, we have heart failure and more than 5 comorbidities. So again, we can say that the presence of comorbidities not only characterize our patients, but is able to influence the outcomes of our patients. What are the most common and most important comorbidities that we find in our patient. First of all, dialysis. We can say that our patients have a kidney food syndrome because the patients with renal failure have, in addition to the complication of diabetes, the complication of the renal failure. That means a worse peripheral arterial disease and worse neuropathy. And there are several studies that show how those patients are much more fragile, and the outcomes are less brilliant than the patients without renal insufficiency. And at the same time, is clear that patients with the dialysis that used to be around 10% in our outpatient clinics now are around 40% of the total. That means that the number of patients with this kind of problems is increasing rapidly. And the most important things that those patients have different outcomes that are really less brilliant than patients without dialysis. But I want to underline and highlight that even if we have a higher amputation, a higher deaths, we have together with the healing and the patients that after 1 year are not amputated, are not deaths, but have still the ulcer, we say that altogether is around 60%. This is for us a good way to approach. That means even if we have not yet the results that we can get in patients without dialysis, we can say that in patients with critical limb ischemia and dialysis, at the moment we are able to avoid amputation and deaths in 6 patients over 10. And for us is a good results. What is the other comorbidities? Comorbidities heart disease, and we know exactly that heart disease is a part of the story of diabetic patients, and is also a part of the story of the patients with diabetic foot. And we have seen how is the link between diabetes, heart failure, and dialysis on our patients. We have divided our patients in 3 groups. That is patients without heart failure, without dialysis, in blue. Patients in this first group, patients with heart failure without dialysis, patients without heart failure but with dialysis, and finally patients with both heart failure and dialysis. As you can imagine, the best in terms of outcomes in blue is a limb salvage, in yellow is a major amputation, in gray deaths. You can see that the best outcomes are in the group of patients without heart failure and without dialysis. And the outcomes is less brilliant in presence of heart failure, but the patients with heart failure have much more deaths in 1 year observation. When we have patients with only dialysis, you can see this paper that is a few years later than the other that I have showed before with the outcomes of patients with dialysis. You can see we have healing limb salvage in 76%. So the limb salvage of patients with dialysis is increasing, and we have a mortality rate around 20. But when we have both dialysis and heart failure, you can see that we have only the possibility to have limb salvage in 4 patients over 10, and we have a mortality rate about 6 in 1 year observation. But again, these are very, very difficult patients to treat. So again, if we are able to save 4 patients for us is a good result. Because we know exactly that diabetic foot is related to mortality. This is a very famous paper by David Armstrong that showed that ischemic ulcer and neuropathic ulcer have the same rate of death rate of patients with several different cancers. And as you can see, a survival of diabetic patients with major amputation is comparable to malignant disease. Therefore, we published this paper and just to highlight as the limb salvage is not a temporary solution, but a life-changing procedure. Why we say that? Because we evaluated 6 years later patients that we have published in 2010 that were patients followed because of critical limb ischemia. And we had at that time the amputation rate of about 14%, death rate about 14%, and altogether around 60% patients with amputation, without amputation, and without healing, but persistence of the ulcer after 1 year observation. So we see here 6 years later, group A were the patients healed in the first study. Group B, patients amputated. Group C were patients that after 1 year observation were not amputated, but not still healed. What is the interesting thing that we found? MD is new deaths. And you can see here that the healed patients had 30% of the deaths. Amputee patients had 43.6% of the deaths. But the very interesting thing is that if you evaluate the time to death, you have 16 months for the group B against the 51 months of the group A. That means that amputee patients die more very, very early than patients that we are able to heal. But we used to say, okay, but we follow patients, and the amputee patients are the worst. Probably they have clinical condition that are much more involved. You can see this slide, and you can see group A, group B, group C. There are no difference in any characteristic of the patients. That means that something else happened in our patients that induce the patients to die after amputation. Hofstad showed in this big evaluation of the family doctors of UK, the relationship between diabetes or lower extremity amputation and death. And the goal was to determine whether amputation was associated with death, as cardiovascular disease and renal failure fully explain the higher rate of death in those who have undergone a lower extremity amputation. So the question is, are those patients much more critical than patients that are not treated by amputation? This is a very huge study because it's a database with 3.7 millions of patients, 77,000 deaths, 6,000 amputation. And this is the evaluation of the hazard ratio. And they conclude that there were not complications known of diabetic patients to explain this excess of mortality. So they conclude that probably because this is a family doctors database, they suggest the family doctors to inform the patients with an amputation that they have a reduced lifespan. To our point of view, we say that this is too late. We must change something. And we say that because we know that in many cases, amputation is performed because it's much more faster than healing the ulcer. Because sometimes the patient are pushing for a fast solution, we say that before to suggest or to approve this kind of treatment, the patient should be informed that he has a reduced lifespan if is in the group of amputee patients. And we are convinced that having this information will probably change the view of both the health providers and the patients and reduce avoidable amputation on the lower lip. Because we still don't know what is the reason behind this increased amputation, increased death in amputee patients, we have seen in this article the reason the group of all amputee of the Lazio region in Italy, just to see if we could find any relationship between the characteristic of the patients and death. And what we found that the depression is a risk factor for death after measure lower extremity amputation. That means that beside the clinical aspects that we are used to take care in our patients, there is a part that we should take care, that is the mental health of our patients, that probably are much more frail after amputation, that suffer for social deprivation, that lose self-consideration, several things that can make those patients much more fragile, much more suffering for the problem. So my suggestion is that probably beside the care of the food, we must take care of the mental health of our patients as part of our task. The other aspects that we found that also renal insufficiency is again another risk factors for death after amputation. That means that our efforts to solve critical limb ischemia in patients with renal insufficiency is much more important, because when we fail, we know that the risk to die is very, very, very high. So in conclusion, the patients with the diabetic foot must be considered the equivalent of a patient with a multi-organ disease. The patients suffering from diabetic foot present an extremely complex condition and numerous comorbidities, in particular cardiological, nephrological, hematological, and nutritional. Comorbidities, particularly heart failure, dialysis, significantly influence the outcomes by increasing the risk of major amputation and mortality. The limb salvage rate is inversely proportional to the number of comorbidities. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Luigi. Thank you very much. It was a journey from the body to soul. And I feel that we indeed all too often forget about the importance of depression. We just cannot see it. So I think we could discuss this for another half an hour, but I'm afraid that people are hardly waiting to hear Dr. Roberto Anichini. Hello, Roberto, from Pistoia. How are you?
Hello, my friend. I'm very happy. It's an honor to stay here for as a holiday, because awareness of diabetic food is an important part, is important of our work. In fact, I'm here, but in the next hour we have a lot of initiative in our country, in my zone, in my city, about awareness of diabetic food. Briefly, I have to present an important point that we will develop in the next months for European meeting of DFood in 2024. If I can, my sorry, I have. Could you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay.
Yeah, it's done.
Well done now.
Okay. I'll try to introduce very briefly our project. The project is about accreditation, benchmarking, and audit in search of excellence also in Europe as in our country of the world. 3 years ago, when we stay together with a group of DFood, we have we known some barriers in Europe to develop a take care patient with diabetic foot. Here you can see a poor awareness of impact, the uneven awareness, the concept of prevention, and inability to move from the situation with a concept of multidisciplinary and multi-professional approach. So, and we discussed about a priority and action in Europe. You can see the first priority was audit to improve regional and national register, and monitor existing DFood unit, a common program to implementation, the technology, and so on. And then action that we decided, but someday before COVID, we discussed about this 27th of February in 2020. So here is the action, internal, the aspect of Europe, the necessity to understand a national organization and what means in Europe today in a different country, a level of awareness of diabetes food. So here is our project, a project to improve a global organization, a different level of care, accreditation of pathway, analyze, evaluate the different results that we have in our work. And then here is some story. We began to discuss about it in Madrid 4 years ago with Lee Roger, and here you can read objective projects and how to create excellence on diabetes and diabetes food. Today, we need to have a new project in Europe, a new project in every continent, so we can improve our way to do. Now we try to define a program, a paper about what is the characteristics of this project, and we hope we have this paper, this draft at the final of this year, and all together with all regional president, all country, we can put into a different aspect in a different country, because we know we have a different region, a different healthcare system, and we need to have some particular, we can touch particular aspect. For example, a team. What does mean a team? What does mean a coordinator of team? How to interweaving goals with our action. Here is today, in comparison with some years ago, a goal of to address and to achieve our results, the holistic approach. A new concept of time is tissue, every time and everywhere. On the team approach, on the pathway of care, and the fast track strategy near to time is tissue, and how to look to our results, to our outcome with our organization. So we'll try to write a paper, a draft about this, and then we can discuss about this aspect for the future. Of course, our way to analyze our results, our outcome, we can measure it, their results with our guideline. So if we put in one hand a guideline, and the other hand our outcome, our organization, we can improve and really know our awareness, our organization to combat this problem of diabetes foot. Here is some aspect of our paper. Of course, how many are our centers that have working on diabetes field, and then the outcome, and then, as you can see, how many centers, world geographic distribution, what region, there are equity to go there, and then the outcome to our zone, our area, our region, our country, a different nation. And then to put together one survey to infrastructure, a documentation for this survey, and the person to understand a basic level of our organization, and to discuss how to organize from the healthcare district to the hospital our organization. We have a job. We discuss in the next week with Abbas about this project, and we can try to send to all organizations in Europe and in other parts of the world our idea, and then we can share this and to discuss together about what is better in different regions and how we can reach what we have from our pathway, to understand in our way to work a strength, a point of weakness, our opportunity, our traits. So a next step, and I finish my talk. As you can see, working outline to be shared with the board and the regional chair after having clearly described the methods and approach, role in this kind of no traditional way to organize that DFOOT take care. And I hope that in the next European Symposium, in the first month of the next year, we will have a specific session to make a project executive in Europe and then to share in every part of the world. Sorry for if I take out some minutes of our discussion, but I think that is a big, important project that we can improve in the next week. And it is our way to give a contribution to the world of to combat against the food in our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberto. Obviously, time seems to be running much faster when you are speaking to the public, but anyway, it was lovely to listen to you. And now I'm afraid we have to continue, and it's my pleasure and honor to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Prashwas, from the hospital, which has always been very special for me because it was King's College where I made my first steps into the diabetic foot field. And he will tell us something, a chapter from the Bible of diabetic foot care. So Prash, welcome.
Thank you very much. I think you can see me, right? So that's great. So it's a great pleasure to be invited, and to be honest with you, I feel very humbled to be speaking today, especially after Luigi and Roberto. And my talk is based on this new wound healing guidelines that have just been released a few months ago. But the International Working Group guidelines have been around for nearly 20 years now, and they've gone through various different iterations. These were the ones from 2015 and 2019, and the number of guidelines are sort of becoming thicker and thicker and longer, because there has been an explosion of evidence, or at least studies, and I'll get into the nitty-gritty of it over the last 10 years or so. And this is the most recent iteration of the guidelines. And back in 2021, we started work as a team. It was led by Fran Game as our chair, and Pamela Chen, a podiatrist from Australia, who was the group secretary, who did a lot of the work. And you may recognize many of the names over here: Ketan, Rolf Lobman from Germany, John Steinberger, Alberto Piergessi from PISA, Vijay Vishwanathan from DFoot International. So a huge number of very eminent people, and myself, trying to sort of come together to develop these new iterations. And we looked at all sorts of technologies and also some interventions like debridement as a part of how we can facilitate wound care in non-healing ulcers. And really, it was a complete new look at evidence. And what we did is looked at all the papers in fresh. So in 2019, in 2015, what they had done is they looked at the last 4 years worth of evidence and then updated it. But given that 7 or 8 iterations had gone on, we looked at all the evidence way back from 1940 onwards, all new. So Pam ran a search, but you might be surprised that from the 7,000-8,000 initial papers that we got, we had to narrow it down to about 400 papers. So we only used randomized controlled trials using the GRADE methodology to evaluate. We did not look at case control trials, single arm studies, or anything like that, because there is so much of data for individual technologies now. And in keeping with what GRADE suggests, mainly looked at or only looked at randomized controls. I said we've looked at hundreds of individual technologies. That's perhaps a little bit of a license here. Essentially, even if you look at a single technology, for example, placental-derived products, each company has its own technology or its own product, which is slightly different to the other product. And often we didn't find two papers using the same kind of product or technology. So essentially, we were comparing hundreds of papers with different technologies within this. Over 2 years, we came up with a list of nearly 30 recommendations. It's 29 on this, but 28 has A and B on it. So I would encourage you to go and look at it. But I'm really here to speak on what's new. And we use the grade way of assessing. So each of our recommendations has two components to it. How strong is our recommendation for or against whatever we are recommending? So you will find it as strong or conditional. And how certain are we that this is a recommendation? So the evidence that we reviewed was whether it was high quality, a moderate, or low certainty of evidence. So everything was divided into these things. For debridement, debridement has always been, sharp debridement has always been recommended. This time around, we went to the extent to say, look, this is a gold standard. And we put that as a strong recommendation, but you'll be surprised to see how few sharp debridement studies are about comparing to the best standard of care. So the certainty of evidence was actually low, and that was our guidance. And we've really not been able to recommend any other forms of guidance debridement as first option. So we've conditionally suggested you can use the other forms if there was no access to sharp debridement or it was contraindicated. But we are really not certain of that recommendation. So we put it that our certainty of evidence as low. When it comes to dressings, the recommendation for sucrose octasulfate in neuroischemic ulceration, which was a new one in 2019, continues. There's only one good randomized control trial. So what we've given it is a conditional recommendation based on moderate quality or moderate certainty of evidence. The grade suggests that to have a recommendation that is strong and of a high certainty, you at least need 2 positive studies. There's only one study on RCT on sucrose octasulfate. We couldn't recommend any of the other different dressing formulations because there isn't good evidence for or against them. So we've just suggested that if you want to use any dressings, and that would be a reasonable thing to do, and you would use it based on comfort, what the wound needs, and what the patient can afford, depending on the individual choices. Hyperbaric oxygen has been previously recommended, and we didn't find any new data over the last few years to consider any changes in the previous recommendation. So the studies that were last previously evaluated in 2010, which made the recommendation, there have been a couple of studies since 2015, but they did not have enough data for us to consider a change in the recommendation. But certainly, again, it's a conditional recommendation based on a low certainty of evidence. One new recommendation is topical oxygen. Lots of studies have happened since 2019 when we last looked at the evidence. So we've had, I think, offhand, about 5 papers this time to review, including the TWO2 study, which was in diabetes care. And on the basis of 3 positive studies, each of them, by the way, different technology. So we've suggested topical oxygen as an umbrella term could be considered. Again, a conditional recommendation based on low certainty evidence. One challenge with throughout all this is that there are no 2 studies or more than 1 study on any of the similar technologies. And it's really challenging when you go and start making recommendations. Negative pressure, of course, we all use, and we are quite good at using them in our patients. And the recommendations are very clear. Consider using them in post-surgical wounds, but there was certainly no evidence to use them in chronic wounds that have not been debrided. This is a strong recommendation not to use in chronic wounds. You can make a chronic wound fresh by doing surgical debridement, and then of course you can consider using negative pressure. There has been some evidence to suggest the use of Leucopatch, which is a combined autologous leukocyte platelet fibrin product. Again, conditional and moderate certainty evidence, only one study, so we can't make any strong recommendation based on a high certainty of evidence, so a moderate one. But of course, all the other studies looking at platelets, other derived therapies, the working group couldn't come to a consensus to actually make a recommendation. So we are not suggesting using these for the time being. Placental products, again, this is one area where there has been a significant increase in data. In 2015, the committee had 2 studies to review. In 2021, when we started it, I think we had 13 studies to review, so a lot of randomized control trials in the meantime. And broadly, there are different products done by different companies, each with its own plus point. Again, an umbrella recommendation where there is facility to afford them, to consider the use of placental-related products as adjunct to standard of care, and the strength being a conditional one. The quality of data was inconsistent, so we can only make a low certainty of evidence. But we didn't find any strong evidence or any moderate quality evidence to recommend any of the other interventions that we reviewed, including certain pharmacological agents and education. Now, it doesn't mean these agents don't work and we shouldn't educate our patients. We may have just not done the right studies. So it's difficult for a guideline group to sit and say you should consider a certain form of education. What we have done, and you'll find in that paper, is recommendations for future research, because what we can't find needs to be further inquired on. And the big challenge for us as a team was the significant variation in standard care between each of the papers. How do we adjust for that? There were study level differences between say 2 studies. If you compared the Explorer Leucopatch study to, say, the 2 studies, you would find that there was a difference in standard care. So study level differences, and within each study, there were center level differences. All that contributed to us struggling to make recommendations and understand the certainty of evidence. So you can see throughout the paper, this is very variable. We did not find, or we were not able to make a recommendation which was strong, which was based on a high certainty of evidence. There is not one over there. So it just shows how much more work we need to do in understanding. And finally, within the same technology, and I alluded to, and this is an example using topical oxygen. You can see we looked at 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7 studies. To be honest with you, each study has its own differences. Each study has its own biases, and each product as a technology has a lot of differences. And you're unable to tease that out when you do a systematic review. And we were not able to look at any products without randomized controlled trials. So that's a recommendation that we will have to sort of consider in the future. But in summary, the new guidelines are out, and I strongly encourage you to look at them and understand them. We've made one strong recommendation, which is to use sharp debridement. and there are about 6 conditional recommendations for product which you may consider using in the right circumstances. But as a committee, we felt there's been a huge uptick in published research, but the quality of the research needs to improve, because for guideline committees and even for us experts, understanding that evidence will make a huge difference to how we make future choices. So this is the committee that met through. Ralph Lobman couldn't come, but here we were at The Hague, looking very happy at the end of it. Now I would all encourage you to go in and read this and take some time, because we've spent a number of hours over 2 years looking at the evidence. And also it'll help you understand why we've made some suggestions and why we've come to those suggestions. Thank you all for asking me to speak, and I hope this Diabetes Awareness Week, we can really push the cause of the diabetic foot, the cause of the at-risk patient and the vulnerable patient, as Professor Uccioli earlier mentioned. Thank you for listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prash. I'm afraid it was really a challenge to concentrate all the data into such short time slot, but you did it beautifully. And the last slides were so straightforward. What is strongly recommended, what conditionally, and that's the info I think we have to take with us home, because trying to find out what works and what doesn't work is like trying to find your way through the jungle, because there are so many things available and so many technologies. So I have to say I feel lost many times.
Yes, we struggle too as a group, and often you have how do you interpret pilot studies? These are not really designed to test a proper product. They're just there to understand whether the product works or not. What is the value of that? So we as a committee spent a number of hours just understanding this. The GRADE methodology really helps you pinpoint the weaknesses of each study, so that's helpful. But as a team, I think individually we were in pairs and we reviewed. I did the dressings with Ralph Lobman, and we looked at 140 papers. So that's a lot of work that goes in, and we distilled that into consider using sucrose octasulfase. But everybody has their own favorite products. So we needed to be very careful and analyze and understand why we are saying yes and why we are saying no. So a lot of work went into it.
Yeah. Thank you very much again. I'm sorry we don't have more time for discussion, but I feel that Beata also prepared some nice things for us. So Beata, if I read correctly, you will tell us about Kazimierz Declaration.
Yes, thank you very much. It's my great pleasure to be here. Due to the shortage of time, I will try to squeeze it to the most important information. And I would like to share with you the information that, first of all, I am very happy we are together and we can share all over the Europe and the world the information that we could do something for our patient with diabetic foot. Second, we are celebrating the Independence Day in Poland, and I hope due to this situation, we could change the problem of diabetic foot into the independent of both of those economical and other problems. And showing into the map of Europe and finding your individual countries, everybody knows what is the real situation with patient with diabetes. And if you compare the situation with the cardiological problems, even with patient with diabetes, the situation seems to be much better. And if you come into the study showing the number of percutaneous interventions around different countries in Europe, it seems much better than the situation around diabetic foot, when most of our doctors do not know what does it mean diabetic foot, and whether and how quickly we have to immediately treat this patient. And it is exactly a myocardial infarction, but not of the heart, but of the foot. So the question is, who is really interested in the problem? If you can find, perhaps none of them, but if you are looking even if in the statistics showing what happens with the patient after the major amputation, even in European countries, you can find that 95% of them remain unemployed. 85% of them have to seek help of other people. 75% live in isolation, and 25% not have proper rehabilitation, and 10% of them remain in bed. And what happened in June? We gathered together in Poland and signed the declaration, and we believe, all of us being here, that it will be a new St. Vincent Declaration. We, being here, declared our willingness to take comprehensive measures to change the situation of patients with diabetic foot and other hard-to-heal wounds, including mortality and other sequelae, such as limb amputations. As Dr. Abbas said, we would like to decrease the number of unnecessary amputations by more than 50%. Via which directions we have to address our activities into healthcare authorities, healthcare providers, and healthcare professionals. And there is a scheme which, of course, could be different in different countries, but generally we have to focus on the prevention. We have to focus on basic competences and the competences of specialists of diabetic foot. And this is another ideal scheme, when if the patient comes into the hospital, has to be decided whether the patient will stay in ambulatory care or will be addressed to the ward, surgical ward, or the internal medicine ward, will be then checked via the different specialists, then rehabilitated, and then adversely come into the center of education. And finally, coming into the end, patient with diabetes complications and healthcare reforms. What is the question from the patient? Great, but I can't afford to pay or to wait or to choose between the public care and private access. And one of our colleagues, he found the data that the cost of 16 amputations could be changed into 120 ulcers who are healed, or 834 patients in whom we will use prevention. So who is responsible for the patient with diabetic foot along Europe? Nobody knows. In some countries, the competences are not shared properly, and we'll be working here in Diabetic Foot and the Food International to change those situations in different countries. And we would like to share our competences, share our knowledge, and try to change the situation, and share also our competences between us, doctors, nurses, physiotherapists, and shake our hands and be together, vascular surgeons, nurses, diabetologists, endocrinologists, all together to decrease the number of amputations. Together, we are stronger. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Beata. It's a great initiative, and I feel this is one of the ways which can lead to better foot care in Eastern Europe, because I feel that all of us who are coming from this part of the world share some common experience, and our healthcare systems have much in common, and much has to be changed in order to improve the care of the patients with foot problems. So I'm afraid we are running really very, very short of time. I'll add a little bit to the story with my own presentation. And I'll try to be as fast as possible. Can you see my slides? Yeah. Okay, so I will not talk about dressings guidelines, but I will go to the very basic level. You will see immediately what I'm talking about. I'll talk about, oops, I'm sorry, I took the wrong one because I've had Jesus, yeah. I'm sorry. I just a little minute and yeah. Okay. Now, yeah. Now we are at the right point. And can you see my screen now? Yeah. So I'll talk about pedicure very quickly because pedicure is something which can be dangerous. I found a couple of papers describing disasters after pedicure. And also in patients with renal failure, there was a paper describing a significantly higher percentage of people with foot ulceration among those who were attending pedicure. Podiatry is a cornerstone of proper foot care, that's what we all know, but unfortunately, podiatrists are not available all over the world, and they are not available in Eastern Europe. So now we have to ask ourselves, what can we do without podiatrists? Or in other words, can a person without medical background touch the diabetic foot at all? And of course, when we try to answer this question, we need to distinguish between diabetes-related foot disease, which of course has to be managed, the patient with diabetes-related foot disease has to be managed within an interdisciplinary team. We have all known about some attempts how to get something resembling podiatry in spite of lack of proper podiatry education. But I won't focus on that. I will focus on so-called healthy feet of people with diabetes. So feet without ulcers, without neuropathy, without ischemia, these feet need pedicure. They need toenail trimming, they need callus removal. But pedicure as such looks like a messy room. If we try to classify pedicure, we find all kinds of things. Some of them might even sound funny. As you can hear about chocolate pedicure, ice cream pedicure, margarita pedicure, champagne pedicure, but nobody knows what it's all about. The situation in my country, in Slovenia, is not brilliant either. Foot care is delivered by pedicurists or beauticians who often go for some short training course of one afternoon, and then they advertise their activity as medical pedicure, which of course is nonsense. Medical pedicure is something which is delivered by a person with medical background. And in our country, the only people with medical foot background who deliver foot care are nurses with special skills and physicians of various specialties. So there was urgent need to put the things in order because as you can see here, the level of education, according to our framework of qualifications, goes from very low to very high. I won't read this, but all these profiles deliver pedicure and advanced foot care. So there was an urgent need to put things in order, and so a group of people of various specialties, doctors, dermatologists, vascular specialists, surgeons, endocrinologists, GPs, and nurses came together to prepare a document with the basic aim to put the things in order to regarding terminology, and first of all to place this education into the formal education system and to define the competencies.
Excuse me, Vilma, your slides are not moving.
Really?
Yeah. We are stuck on a first slide.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay, you can continue from there, but
Yeah, so share, so I move to
go to the bigger screen.
this one. Yes, I will. Now you see the suggested classification of foot care.
Yeah, that's slide number 21, we can see here.
Yes. Okay, so we tried to put the things in order regarding classification of pedicure, defining the profiles, defining the procedures, defining the competencies. We defined 6 types of pedicure, from the very elementary one to the most sophisticated ones, dealing with diseased feet. And we defined the profiles who could do it. And not only that, we defined the education required to perform various types of pedicure. Of course, in this way, we tried to group the profiles who have been dealing with the feet in the past into the system. And also we defined licensing and the exams which these people would have to take. We also planned periodic checking. And the most important part was the competencies, so to define what some profile is allowed to do and what he is not allowed to do. And the most important thing was that pedicurists should not use scalpels, sharp instruments, and that graduated pedicurists should not deal with open wounds or patients with serious comorbidity. When the document was ready, we submitted it to the Ministry of Health to extended professional boards for confirmation. And at the moment, we are almost ready, so only 2 out of 8 boards have to give their signature on the document. What we feel is this document could serve as a model for basic foot care in whole Eastern Europe. If yes or no, I'll speak a little bit more on that next week on the conference of diabetic foot surgeons, and we'll discuss it in detail in Bled next year if we manage to get the sponsors for the meeting. So thank you for your attention, and I apologize for the technical issues. Now, Abbas, I hand over to you.
Okay, I think we have crossed our limit. We are almost 1 hour 15 minutes. So I would go directly to the thanking you all. I would like to thank all the speakers, Professor Lucchesi from Italy, Dr. Roberto from Italy, Dr. Prashant from UK, Professor Beata from Poland, and Wilma from Slovenia, who took their time for their busy schedule and accepted invitation to talk and lecture on this important issue. Thank you very much from my bottom of left ventricle, indeed. I would also like to thank the chair and the coordinator for this event, Dr. Wilma, for supporting me whenever we need her. Thank you very much, Wilma. Without you, it would have been difficult.
It was a pleasure.
I would like to thank all the board members, regional chairs, and advisory of DFood International for working hard to get this program running smoothly, and it's been running all over the world, 7 regions. Special thanks to core team of Diabetes Food Awareness Program, Secretariat, and IT service provider. Finally, I should like to thank all the delegates, because without delegates, no webinars are successful or possible. So thank you very much, all the delegates. And lastly, I hope to see you tomorrow, 12th November, Sunday, at 2 p.m. Central European Time. There is a global meet where all the 7 regions will meet. Once again, thank you very much, all of you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Abbas.
Bye. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Bye.
Thank you very much. See you late earlier. Bye.
I'll see you on Monday, Roberto.
Yes, on Monday. Bye.
Bye.